Welcome back to the Ginge Treasure. Today we're gonna do a guess what? You'll never guess. We're gonna do a wire wrap, and it's gonna be a pendant. Another awkward shaped crystal. This one is going to be a moonstone. Seems like I have three favorites that I like to wrap. It's the amethyst, the moonstone, and the amazonites. It may seem like they're my favorite, but really it's just because I have an abundance of all of them, and they're good to practice with. So this one is going to be an awkward shaped moonstone. It's got some semi-cubular shape to it. It's like a cube triangle. But even with that, there's just some really awkward edges and bulges to be working with. So that will be the ideal stone for how to wire wrap an awkward shaped crystal into a pendant. So the first thing we're going to do is select our 20 gauge wire. We work with the 20 gauge and the 24 gauge. This one is the 20 gauge, which is more thick than a 24 gauge, even though it's a smaller number. It kind of works backwards in that sense. And I'm just kind of eyeballing. Generally, I'll use about a hand's length of wire, which is probably, it's actually a good amount. Looks to be a good amount. Sorry about that crash. And if you'll notice the atmosphere of where we're at today, you can guess, yes, I once again slept at work. And this is the workplace break room table that I'm working on. Probably won't be the last time, but I do intend to head home after this. So what I'm doing now is just taking from this 24 gauge spool here about an arm's length. Actually, a little bit more than an arm's length. Probably, let me actually reel that back a little bit, because I don't think I'll need more than an arm's length for this one. Although, if you're unsure, like this one, actually I reel it back a little bit too much, and it's a little bit less than an arm's length. And so generally I like to overestimate than underestimate, although I like to get as close to the amount of wire length that I need as possible. And there's just something really sweet about when you have just the perfect amount of length that you run out of wire right when you finish the wrap. There's something divine in that. However, when you run out of wire before you're finished, that's a big uh-oh. So let's take a risk today. I cut a little bit short off my estimate. Here, before I get to that, let me just go over what I'm doing right now. So what I did is, I'll just unwrap it real quick. So what I did is I kissed the 2 points together of the 24 gauge wire, and then slide that all the way down to meet the bottom here. And then from there, I just kind of, this 20 gauge wire is short enough that I can just kind of eyeball where the middle is. And then I take the middle of where that 24 gauge wire is and just begin to wrap around. Nice and neat little bands. Just coiling. And I'm gonna stop at, what is that, about, say 7 or so. And then this one is where I started. See how it's kind of off skew? I'll just take my fingernails and pinch that together, tuck it in with the rest of them. And then from here, I'm left-handed, so generally I'll hold in position with my right hand and then wrap with my left hand. If you'll notice where my fingers are placed, I have my index on the back, my thumb pinching down to hold this wire in place, and then on my left hand, my index finger is kind of the guide to keep the wraps nice and neat and tidy, and then I twist the rest of my left hand. doesn't really matter the numbers so much. What's more important is the length of the band's wrap. I'm trying to think of how I'm gonna place this. That kind of looks nice, right? This for the top and that's the bottom. So I think that's what we'll do today. So with that, this is about enough, because when it's a point like this at the bottom, you don't need a lot of wraps around the bottom to get started with. Just enough. However, like, let me show you, for example, if it were a flat part, you would want to have enough wire to be wrapping all the way around the bottom of the stone and then just a little bit up, just around the corner there. And then give me a second, I'm gonna take a little sip of my coffee before it goes cold. And I totally spilled. That's all right. French press today. Learning new tricks of the trade. Pretty fun stuff. I don't support Starbucks. So I try not to support any kind of giant corporations. Seems to me that that's kind of the first step in independence, we'll call it. And then from here, I'm going to twist out what I call the longhorns, and that just gives me room to continue wire wrapping. And if you'll notice, what I did with my fingers here is, even though it stops down here, I created this gap by pinching all the way up here with my index and my thumb. And that's because if you look at the stone, there's this huge bulge, right? It's not a flat stone. There's gonna be a lot that I need to stretch around so that when I place the stone in there, the wrap's not gonna be so tight that the stone doesn't fit in. There's gonna be enough wiggle room, we'll call it, to work with. And then we'll flip around and do the same thing, pinching slightly higher than where the band's wrapped. And then we'll continue to wrap and swing. What I did there is I swung around so that the wires that were going out on this side swing around, and now they're wrapping on this side, same thing, vice versa. The wires here, swung around, wrapped here. And then from that, we're just gonna kind of test the waters, slide these down. That's probably a little bit more wide than I need it, but this is a pretty fat stone, so let's find out. Moment of truth. And that is correct. It's slightly more than I needed, but honestly, if the wiggle room is more than is needed, it's always easier to solve than less. And I'll hold off on fixing that for now, because that's going to be towards the end, is where I show you a little style of how to work that, how to tighten it. And then from here, we're going to press the stone in place. So more or less at the bottom, I have my middle finger here, and then on the back as well. And then to counter that weight and pressure, I have my thumb applied also at the bottom. And they're both kind of pushing inwards and upwards towards my index finger. And then my index finger is just at the top, pushing straight down. And so while my fingers are in place, pushing, holding the stone in place, I continue the wrap. I did about 4, so I could do one more. I'll do 2 more. I always seem to go more than I say I will. That's all right, as long as I'm transparent with it. And then so here I've just flipped the stone around, and then same thing, locking with my fingers, locking the stone in place, and then just tightly wrapping. And then just do a few wraps or so. Really, I just want to have, so this is the second time going across. Right now I don't want to have too many going across, because then it kind of takes away from the showing off the stone. It's kind of hiding it, and you don't want to do that. You want to show the stone as much as possible, but you also want to keep it the pendant secure. Because otherwise, if the stone falls out, what's the point, right? So from here, I'm gonna go across one more time. And I think after this, and after I balance it out with the wrap coming on, after I flip the stone around and do it again on the other side, I'll probably end up doing one more wrap across. Should be good. So that'll be like 4 total on each side. Oop, the stone jumped out. Just tuck that back in. Got that locked back in place. And then tightly, it's really important for the first 2 or 3 to get those wraps real tight, because that way it keeps this band, this wire that goes across, keeps that tight. Because you don't want to have especially at this point towards the end, you don't want to have a lot of gap. It's okay in the beginning, maybe the first 2, but then towards the end, if it's still loose, well, then it might end up being too loose that the stone could fall out. Alright, so we're gonna do one last time, going across. And from here, I'm gonna just keep wrapping all the way. I'm gonna wrap about to here, where my fingernail is. And it looks like because there, I can bend the wire down, kind of 90-degree angle, and it will meet right here in the middle of the top, right where I will do the same thing on the other side. And that's the idea, that's the aim right there. And then another thing too, if you look closely, you see what happened here is that I actually I was wrapping outwards, and then on the last one it kind of tends to sometimes want to wrap backwards and back onto itself. Just make sure you're not doing that. Alright, from here, we'll stop, switch around, get the other side. Pull tightly with the first 2 wraps, and then it should be pretty easy. From then forward, from then on forward. I just want to kind of have it symmetrically aligned. So I think right about there is good. And then I'll just pinch down with my fingernail on those just to kind of push everything into place. And then from here I'm just going to bend those down. And then from here we'll swing these 2 wires across. So you have this kind of square window in there, right? That's what it looks like from the top at this point. And before I pick up the pliers, first thing I want to do is take one wire, one of the 24 gauge wires, and swing it around across. So it comes from this wire, right? You swing it around this one over the top, and then underneath both 20 gauge wires. Tight, and then I'll do it once more, and this way both of the 20 gauge wires, they get wrapped together, kind of finally holding it all into place. And then I'll flip it upside down. I mean, technically I guess you don't have to flip it upside down. I just find it easier to work with. And then as well, you could be right-handed or something and just be doing the reverse of what I'm saying. So there's not a lot of like absolute that you have to follow my style, but I'm just showing you what's easiest for me and probably what's going to be in general easiest for most people. So here it's a little tight, that's why I'm using the needle nose pliers to kind of finalize that loop. And then I'll just pull tight. And so this is what it's looking like now. I'll do one more, going under, and through. So that's kind of the final phase. I'm gonna actually bend that one this way. It's kind of what it looks like in the final phase of this step. Push it down, and then from here, pull these wires up so it kind of looks like now the crystal has some really long horns or antlers. I generally use 2 digits of the finger to estimate the amount of length that I'll need. It looks like that's about what that is. And then from there, I just pinch down with the flat part of the pliers, create that 90-degree angle. So for the pliers, I bent this way, and now with the circular finger part of the pliers, I'm gonna twist the other way in the opposite direction. And you'll know that you did it right if it looks like a capital Q, like a circle with the Q tail, or Q-tip, Q tail. And we'll just continue to wrap all the way to the bottom there. And then from there, we're gonna take that Q-tip and just curl it, kind of tucked under, so you see where that's the tip coming out there. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because from there we're gonna take the other 20 gauge wire and wrap that tightly snug. And what is going on here? I think it's because I did too many loops, add a little bit too much length, and well, three's not a bad amount. I'm not sure what happened there, but my loops were coming undone, so I'm just gonna use the pliers fingers to recreate those loops. And then continue onward with wrapping the 20 gauge wire around the neck. And then kind of the same thing with this tip as well. We're just gonna take the tip and tuck it underneath all that wrap. All right, and then so for the 24 gauge wires, it's the same thing. This one didn't have that much extra length, so I'll just do it wrapped around one time. And then the same thing for this 24 gauge wire. I'm gonna try to get it wrapped. So I wrapped it around this one because that's the tip there. And I'm just gonna try to like cover up that exposed tip as best as possible, so that way it doesn't get caught on something. And then finally, just curl that tip under. And tuck it in. So here we're just about done, except for these bottom two are pretty loose. So what I'm gonna do is just pinch right there in the middle with the tip of the pliers and twist either left or right. The direction is not so important. And twist one, and then the other side. Twist two, and then I'll go ahead, this one's a little fat too, so I'll twist that one as well. And that's how you do that.